From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, September the 18th, 2024. The IDF today announced the deaths of 4 Israeli soldiers killed yesterday during fighting against terror group Hamas in Gaza. They are 23-year-old Captain Daniel Mimon Toaf, 21-year-old Staff Sergeant Amit Bakri, 21-year-old Staff Sergeant Dotan Shimon, and 20-year-old Staff Sergeant Agam Naim, the first female soldier killed in the IDF's ground operation who was an Army paramedic. Dozens of female soldiers were killed during Hamas's massacre on October the 7th. The 4 IDF soldiers were killed yesterday after entering a booby-trapped building in Rafah. 4 other soldiers were injured in the blast. Fighting, meanwhile, continues in Gaza, with Israeli forces eliminating terrorists and terror infrastructure. The IDF saying today that the Air Force carried out a targeted and intelligence-based strike on Hamas terrorists who were operating in a command and control complex in the area that was previously used as a school in Gaza City, now being used by the terrorists to plan and carry out terrorist operations against the IDF forces and the State of Israel. The IDF noted that before the attack, many steps were taken to reduce the chance of harming civilians, including the use of precision weaponry, aerial contracts, and additional intelligence information. Noting once again how Hamas systematically violates international law, brutally exploiting civilian institutions and the population as human shields for terrorist acts. And the IDF continues to defend the northern border with Lebanon amid ongoing rocket and drone attacks by terror group Hezbollah at northern Israel, including a barrage of some 20 rockets that were fired earlier today at Kiryat Shmona. There were no injuries reported there. The IDF continues to respond to the attacks, hitting Hezbollah terrorists and terror targets in Lebanon. And staying with Lebanon, Lebanon State News Agency reported more explosions today in the country, saying that hundreds of handheld radios used by Hezbollah members exploded late this afternoon, causing some 300 injuries and reportedly 9 deaths. This follows yesterday's incident where thousands of pagers used by the terror group exploded. Hezbollah and Lebanon have blamed Israel for the incidents. Israel has not commented. The IDF said today that a UAV launched from Iraq was intercepted by Israeli Air Force fighter jets over the Sea of Galilee area, saying rocket and missile sirens were sounded following the possibility of falling shrapnel from the interception. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met today with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Cairo, where the U.S. State Department wrote the secretary discussed efforts to finalize a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza that would alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people and secure the release of all hostages held by Hamas. The secretary thanked the president, it wrote, for Egypt's ongoing efforts as a mediator in this effort. Meanwhile, the families of the American hostages still held in Gaza spoke today at an event of the National Press Club, where they emphasized their ongoing pursuit of a resolution that ensures the safe return of all hostages and the urgent need for international pressure on Hamas, which it noted violated a previous agreement and brutally executed 6 hostages last month before issuing new demands to negotiators. The hostages who remain captive by Hamas in Gaza have now been held for 348 days. Co-chairs of the House Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Antisemitism and members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congresswoman Kathy Manning and Congressman Chris Smith, introduced a bipartisan resolution yesterday calling on countries and international bodies to join the United States in endorsing the global guidelines for countering anti-Semitism. Manning saying the alarming rise in anti-Semitism in recent years, particularly in the aftermath of October the 7th, poses a grave danger to Jewish communities around the world. She said governments can and should do more to counter this hate. Smith saying the global guidelines will help countries confront this pernicious evil by providing them with best practices, effective guidelines, and the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. He said these essential tools will empower legislators and policymakers to more effectively expose anti-Semitism in its many manifestations and combat the alarming surge in bigotry, intolerance, and prejudice against Jews. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, September the 18th at 7 o'clock, David Harris speaks with Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, for an in-depth discussion on the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East today. At 7:30, Rabbi Ammiel Hirsch urges his congregation not to remain indifferent in the face of world events, reminding us that compassion must lead to action. At 8, Shalom Hartman Institute President Daniel Hartman speaks with Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid. At 9, the late Richard Stone is on L'chaim. At 10, a replay of Rabbi Ammiel Hirsch. At 10:30, an encore of the news. And coming up next, it's Thinking Out Loud. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, September the 18th, 2024. I'm Teisha Bader. Am Yisrael Chai.